So we're going to have a look today at curvelets, as they are sometimes known. They're the more almost precise version that can be blocked together, or there's that sort of freer approach that is sort of improv curved patchwork, where your curves might not be so accurately drawn and cut. So you've got a little bit more randomness to your sort of shapes of curves. So the board that I have put up on Pinterest, which we'll look through, has got a mix of sort of really quite free drawn curves and then these more accurate little curves here that become almost these mini inch blocks, if you like. So the way that they are done, and I can draw around these little curvelets, you can make your own, is what you've got is your seam allowance has already been sort of added for your sewing your curves together, and that is why you end up with a very precise sort of shaped square, as you can see there. So what it is when you cut the sort of convex curve and the concave, what you actually see is when I place those over each other, might be a bit tricky to see because it's yellow perspex. The actual inner curve here, this convex, is actually drawn with slightly more seam allowance. So when we ease this convex curve into the concave curve, you actually need less amount of fabric to fit into this inside curve. So I've got both cut out to sort of show you the way. And then if you ever do buy these sort of packs or make your own, you've sort of got your two pieces that fit together to create this block. And then you've got a block at the end that you just place over and make sure that once these two are joined together, that they become this size here. And what this shows you here is when I use this here, that's sort of an inch and a half there, is that when you've sewn it to other blocks, what you'll end up with is tiny mini blocks of an inch. You can get bigger ones of these, but it's added on that sort of quarter-inch seam allowance. So that is a very, very precise way to create these curvelets, as they're known. The way we have mainly done it before is by having different squares of fabric that you can layer up together. Like I said, you can do it with 2 or 3 colours. That is up to you. Anything sort of to add a curve on, you can use something circular to draw around to get that quarter circle, or you can draw it freehand. I've got here a I've forgotten what these are called now. Tractors. Yes, thanks for the nod. To draw on, lay down and draw around this curve to mark onto here. If I then also had wanted to cut 3 curves, I'd draw 2 lines in place. So what I'd already done here is placed this protractor over my 2 colours there and cut this curve, and I've got one here, 1 block here, and 1 block here ready to pin and sew, which I've just got to show you there. But if you just look here, what you'll see is there isn't that sort of extra seam allowance added for this interior circle there. So what you do end up finding is that once you've sewn it, a little bit of the top outer curve ends up sort of sticking out past where you've sewn, but that's fine because we can always cut that off. The other thing to do is just ease it in gently so that it does all fit, and sew it, and it sort of distributes itself into that shape. But if you look here, if I sort of place this, it is going to be sewn right sides together, so we'll talk about the way to do that. But if I sort of push that in by the 0.5 centimetre it's going to get sewn, you can see here these extra bits stick out. So the other way to do that is place it, once you've cut it, in by about 1/4 inch or 0.5 centimetre, and cut those extra pieces off. So if you look at the piece that I've cut from the curvelet templates that I've got here and here, you can see here the pattern pieces. When I lay that next to it. Here, it does extend further out, but when it will get sewn together, it matches up. So that's just to show you the different ways of sort of either using a pre-bought solid template or creating your own like this. Like I said, creating it on your own, cutting your own curves, you do get more of that sort of organic finish. And again, you'll see some of the examples on Pinterest where it's really been drawn freehand. So it's not sort of an equal circle, it's just sort of an organic curve or oval kind of shape as well. So the first thing we're going to do is stack up our fabrics. If you're wanting to use 3 colours, I'd say you can stack those on top of each other. Just don't do any more than 3. If you're just using 2 colours, like I said, just stack up 2 colours at a time. And then the first thing we'll do is, once they're layered up accurately, is draw on our curve. So what I would do, so because I'm going to have 3 maybe on this one, I'm going to make the first one not too big, otherwise the outer one will end up almost too near this outer edge, and we need to have some seam allowance. So that's why I sort of said to go for 6 centimeters. You just a bit more to play with. Just don't do your third curve sort of any further than a sort of centimeter from the edges there. So the first one I could sort of draw like so. If you haven't got this, just sort of draw around something. You can draw around something circular. And then this one, again, line up there. Might just try and find something else circular, or can draw by freehand. The other thing is you can do is sort of measure sort of 2 centimeters or whatever size you want to away. So if I mark from that first curve 2 centimeters, what I can then do is sort of join those up together, create that other curve. It's slightly, as you can see, wider here than there, but that will give us this more sort of organic finish. If you want something more precise, what I would do is just go for 2 colors to start with, and just sort of place the center of your circular template or your protractor on this right angle, so that the curve that I draw is really quite accurate and even to the rest of it. So that's the 2 options of getting started there. So this one here is going to be my 2 colour one. So what we're doing is just cutting through both of our colours there. So, and then what we can do is swap around. We've got the contrasting shape there. So as I just mentioned here, when we actually go in sort of our really small 0.5 centimetre seam allowance, if I just place that on there as if to just show you how sort of you do get this slight extra at the end, you can always just trim off 0.5 centimetre from the edge, the outer curve there. I don't always do this. With this one here that I've pinned, which I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment, I've just actually eased it in, and that still does kind of sit flat. So the way that we're going to get these to sit together is I'm just going to crease this outer curve here, right sides together, just crease along there. You can always just put a little mark there, pin, and then the same here, right sides together, and just mark our curve here. So what I will then do is place this point and this point together here, pin those together, and then what you probably find more a little bit useful is if you want to just snip into this curve, this outer curve, with a few little notches, it sometimes helps it fit round into this curve here. So, like I said, I will often just fold it so that the straight edge here and the straight edge of the inner curve match up together here. So we've got a sort of right angle to start with, and we'll get a nice square curve. And then I do the same on the other side. I'll just pop one here as well. So that's can be useful. Just make sure that they're matching each other there going downwards. And then all I've got to do is ease this rest of the curve into, so it doesn't matter which way you do it. You just don't want to sort of avoid any, if you like. So that's where that just shaving off that 1/2 centimetre can help a bit, so that this eases in really nicely with no sort of gathering here. In all of that in place. And then, like I said, I've done this on the sewing machine before and by hand. I think it's a nice one to do by hand, nice and relaxing. You can thread up. I'm using machine cotton here. I've doubled that over, and I am just going to, if you do, if it helps to sort of with your a fabric marker, you can always have marked here. Where's my curve here? I can always sort of on the back of it mark my seam allowance if that's easier to follow, or you can just do that by eye. So I'm just going to do really small little stitches. You could do a back stitch, or you can just do a line of running stitches, but really close together from one side of the curve round to the other side there. I'll just do that, and then I'll show you the next step. So as you can see here, I did follow the curve. Because this is a piece of old sheeting, it's sort of pulled ever so slightly there. So you can see this isn't an exact square here. So when I actually lay it on my cutting mat, what I can do is just retrim the edges. And what I've got here is a centimetre either side of where the curve is. So that works quite well for me to just trim off there some of the outer brick. So just to get it all squared up, ready for if you want to sew it together at the end, if you create 4 blocks. So this is us doing the just 2 coloured little curves or curvelets. The curvelets tend to just, that they're known as, tend to just be these ones that come in the 2 colours. And again, this one here, that's the improv, referred to as the improv improv curve, sorry, is where there's often 3 colours. So this time, what I've got stacked up is my 3 colours. And then what I'm going to do is just cut those. What I might do is just come in marginally a bit lower here. It is the back of my fabric, just because I don't want these too close together, because we will be doing a seam allowance with them. So they'd be almost touching in colour. So I'm just going to put that a bit freehand here, just a little bit further down. So I've cut one there. There. And now I'm going to cut second curve here. So this one is, we will want to do more squaring up, because we've obviously got where the concave and the convex angles meet up. Some of them will end up longer. So we then will recut those into square blocks at the end. So now what I've got is 1 colour, white, navy, and a pattern. And then what I could always do is just shuffle the pattern on. So then I've got white, navy, and a pattern. And then put that on the 3rd there, white, navy, and a pattern. So what I've done is got 3 there in all those different colours as well. So what I will now do is do the same way as I did with the 2 curves that I had, and I will find the centre of this one here, the centre of the inner curve, and I will first start by joining this one to here. So again, if it does help to just pop that in, if I just lay that over the top there by about 1/2 centimetre in, I can always take a sliver off this outside edge, or what you can do is sort of trim it off at the end. But if you find that easier, just trim the outer curve down slightly. So I'm going to pin that together. It will bend back here. So if you need to make some notches in this curve, I'm going to sew that together, and then I will show you the next step. So that curve's sat in there really quite nicely without me having to sort of realign it there, just by cutting off that extra bit of this curve here. So then the next step when you're doing your triple curves will again be now me folding this right sides in half, finding the center of this curve and easing that in. But if you want to, as I've previously mentioned, want to just sort of lay it on and trim away some of the excess here, the other curve, give that a go as well. So it's just the same process again, we're just repeating it for a second time. So finished up that third curve now. Again, you can see it slightly pulled out of shape, so I can place that back on the cutting mat and just straighten that off, square it up. And what you can make sure is when you do your other multiples of this, is that they all sort of square off to the same point there. So this has sort of come down now to 4 centimeters here. So with straightening, with straightening off, get that full square, it sort of ended up as 4 by 4 around each size from this side, because obviously we've had 2 seam allowances and we lose a bit with each outer curve as well. So I'll make the others of those, and then you can always look at joining them together and tessellating those in different ways. So we've got the triple curve there, and we've got curve there, well, which has ended up more 5 by 5 rather than the 4 by 4 centimeters. So I've just made 4 more of these 2 colour ones for now. So we had to go at a triple one, which I've got others to make there. And then I've just done 4 here of these 2 colour ones, which I've trimmed down. This one here just needs a little bit more straightening off. So what you can then do is play around with simply just with 4 of them, different ways to tessellate and how you might want to put those together. So you could just create, if you wanted to, a whole circle, or as you just saw there, maybe 3/4 and then another one facing the other way. Or again, I could just tessellate that one there as well. So we've got 2 curves going this way and 2 curves going down here. So it's, you can, yeah, really just play around with it. You could have them all sort of facing downwards. The more you have, the more different sort of optical illusions you can create. So you can see there with this one here with the white, if I just play around here, you begin to sort of get sort of little kind of waves or different patterns where one colour looks repeated throughout. So that's just a little introduction into curvelets and curved improv patchwork.